Hi, folks. This is Mark Smith. I'm with Family Tree Life Coaching, and I have an interesting video today. Who are you? Where'd you come from? And why did you marry somebody who hurts you? Is the title of my video today. Um, how does life coaching or if you go to a therapist, how does that work? Some people think that you read a book and you find out what the person's um, uh, love language is, which is so preposterous. I can't even put into words how unhelpful that is to the process of really doing work on yourself and healing. Uh, some healers, marriage counselors might put themselves out there and as somebody who can help you, and all they do is try to teach you about communication. Not helpful. Not helpful at all. What we do when we work with people, let me pull one out. We use a genogram, which is 4 generations on one piece of paper. You see it? And when this is done, it's almost completely covered with colored pens, ink, and writing. There's no white space left on the front. And I use this every time I'm working with a couple. I'll put the family tree on my lap. Then I'll update it if need be. But I know who people are. So effective work on yourself begins with you really knowing who you are and where you came from. There's a verse in the Bible, and don't get freaked out. I'm not going to get all religious on you. It's just a verse from the Bible. It says in Numbers 14:8, the Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression. But he will by no means clear the guilty. He visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and upon the children's children unto the third and fourth generation. So for us to figure you out, we just need to get 4 generations. These are your grandparents. These are your parents. This is you. We'll put the kids on the back. We want 4 generations to figure out who you
I
are.
missed that. Could you say it again, please?
Siri is talking with me.
Interesting question.
Okay, stop. Technology. I don't know what I said to set her off. So, what we try to do in our approach is we try to get people into a recovery process. And what do you need to be in recovery for, and what is recovery? People associate recovery with alcohol and drugs, but that's not what I'm talking about, unless that is your issue. What I'm talking about is just simply knowing the truth of you. What is your issue? Are you controlling? Do you have PTSD? Are you a rager? You got something. Trust me, you got something. You probably have 2 or 3, 4 somethings. And it's all, are you defensive? Are you overly jealous? You got something. Are you freaky about money? Come on now. Don't look at me like you don't have no issues, because everybody's got them. So the first thing about recovery is you hit bottom. Your walls come down. You're broken. And that's when people show up to therapy. The second thing is you gain insight into your issues. The third thing is, you know what? We're all just little bitty kids walking around in adult bodies. I'm 60 years old, but there's a little bitty kid inside me. Every now and again, he goes to crying. So the third part of recovery is in part healing the wounds from your childhood, having a good, long, snotty cry, having a whole bunch of good, long, snotty cries, where after which you will feel much better. It's very cathartic and cleansing. So when I do these family trees, you'd be shocked at how accurate some ethnic stereotypes are. If I get somebody who has German on both sides of the family, I just go down and put workaholic next to their name. If I get somebody who is Irish, many times there's rage and alcoholism in the family. The reason why there's stereotypes is there's some truth to it. I've never met a family full of Germans without them being workaholics. Okay, so I'm going to read you something from the book Roots, because Kunta Kinte, the hero of the story, he had lost touch with who he was. And when he saw the slaves coming in and being sold at auction, he knew exactly where they came from. And when he was out and about amongst other slaves, he could tell by the skin color and various other physical descriptors. He could tell which tribe they were from, but they had been there so long, they didn't even know which tribe they came from. So this is Alex Haley's words. He wrote, Kunta realized how lost he had become. Day by day and year by year, he had become less resisting, more accepting, until finally, even without realizing it, he had forgotten who he was. In countless ways, he did as well as said and thought. His Mandinka ways had slowly been replaced by those of the slaves he had been among. Kunta vowed to himself that now more than ever his dignity must become a shield between he and they. He vowed that his dignity should become a shield between he and they. How ignorant of themselves they are. They didn't know who they were. They didn't know where they came from. They knew nothing of their ancestors, as he had been taught from boyhood. So he told his children, he told his grandchildren, they told the story. The story was important. It got passed all the way down to Alex Haley. And then, next thing you know, there's this phenomenon called Roots back in 1976. If you haven't seen the miniseries Roots, which was one of the most watched programs in the history of television, check that out, because you really are missing something. Nowadays, there's this scientific tool called Ancestry.com, or some of the other companies where you put a little saliva on a stick. My daughter got me this for Christmas, so I haven't done it yet, but my sister did it, and I always wanted to be Italian, and I found out the strongest percentage that we have is Italian. We're 19% Italian. But you can find out a lot of stuff. If you don't want to find out stuff about yourself, don't take this test, because you might find out some stuff you didn't want to know. You might find out there's a long lost brother or sister somewhere, a long lost child somewhere. You might, very detailed information that comes with this. So I used to tell people, and only a therapist would say something so demented. or a life coach would say something so demented. I used to say, "Heaven in heaven, we'll know all things, and there'll be a big movie screen, and we'll find out who our parents were. We'll find out who our grandparents were. We'll find out who our great grandparents were. We'll find out the secrets of our spouses. We'll find out everything there is to know about our friends and about our children." And then when I went through finding out some stuff about 5 years ago, I think finding out all the dirt is actually not going to be heaven. I think that'd be hell. You know, there are some things that you don't want to know. So, if I were doing a family tree on Mark Smith, what I would find out about his father and his mother would tell me everything I needed to know about Mark Smith. This is what I found out about my father, partially through my sister's Ancestry.com, partially through interacting with relatives. My dad's mother was 12 years old when he was born, and his father was 38 years old. He later went to jail for statutory rape, not for fathering my father, but another underage young woman, and he went to jail. But he was the Italian fellow. His mother, my father's mother, Cora Brown, from Butler, Pennsylvania, was described by a family member as a sconniver. And you say, "What's a sconniver?" It's a conniver and a skinflint sort of mixed together, I guess. But she was a con woman. She was a user. My father grew up very poor. He didn't have a white shirt to graduate in. They didn't teach him to take care of his teeth, and when he joined the Air Force, they had to pull all his teeth out, and he had dentures. And he would work to make money by setting up bowling pins, was the story. So, and then my my dad would save money, and there were bonds that were he was sending to his mother to hold for him, but then he never saw that money back. So, and then my dad's stepfather, Ray Brown, it was told me, used to beat him. So your actual father has no contact with you and is a child molester. Your mother is a user and a manipulator and a con woman, and your stepfather beats you bloody. So what kind of guy is that going to be? My dad was sweet and he was codependent, but he had this obliviousness around him. He was either eating, watching sports, reading the paper, or watching a movie, or playing bridge, or asleep or working. That was it. He didn't really interact much with his kids. So here's a universal law, and that is that you always marry somebody equally as healthy as you or equally as unhealthy. So my dad, what he was passive, he had been abused and he had been taken advantage of financially. So what did he need? He needed my mother. My mother became a conniver. So here's my mother's story. My grandmother was a nanny for a family in Philadelphia, and she grew up in an orphanage because her mother had mental illness. Bipolar runs in about half the females on my side of the family, and she was one of them. So she grows up with three brothers in an orphanage. She becomes a nanny, and then she has an affair or is taken advantage of by the father of the home, the husband in the home. She gets pregnant, and off my mother goes to an orphanage for the first 3 years of her life. Then, lucky her, she's picked up by a raging narcissist, my grandfather, who hated my mother because, she represented the children he couldn't have due to a physical problem, and he was a money obsessed, raging, mean little man is what he was, and that was my mother's story. So my mother needed a passive man that she could use for money. My dad was a postman. He didn't make a lot of money, but he had a steady income. And my dad needed somebody who would lie, cheat, use him for money, rage at him, and control him. So, and then these two broken people got together and had 7 children. They weren't healthy enough to have a goldfish. And I was number 2 of 7 children. There were 3 boys, then there were 4 girls. 2 of my sisters are now deceased. So coming out of that mess, thankfully when I was 17, I had a born again experience. So instead of going a troubled route, I went pretty much straight and narrow, and I was blessed to marry an anti-type. Probably only 5 to 7% of people marry an anti-type, and that is the complete and utter opposite of who the one who hurt you the most. The person who hurt me the most was my mother, so I picked a woman who was completely opposite of my mother. And that worked very well for 27 years. But you get into midlife, your walls come down, and if you've been in a relationship that's emotionally cut off, like all marriages are after 25 years, and there are your types out there, then it's a very dangerous place to be. So after my anti-type, which I had my children with, thank goodness, then there's a series of mother clones that I've been involved with. Now you might say, are you saying your wife is a clone of your mother? And in a way, Renda has some qualities of my mother. But what's different about Renda is in recovery. And she's getting healthier every day. I'm so proud of her practice. I'm so proud of the work that she's doing. So a marriage is a very complex organism. Very, very few people have the health, mental health, or the communication skills, the insight, the objectivity, the determination and knowledge of family patterns to figure out their own issues without help. I get guys in there all the time who think they can figure out their own issues and they finally give up. Blending genealogical information with family systems theory has given life coaches powerful tools in understanding, naming, and treating a variety of marital issues. So I can help you put the pieces of who you are, where you came from, and why you picked who you picked, instead of allowing that to sabotage and destroy your relationship. When I get people in the office, I tell them, they're either going to learn something, because good therapy is about truth. I tell them, you're either going to learn something or I'm going to chase you out my building. And I really don't care which one it is. I prefer not chasing you out my building. But if you're there to learn, if you're there to find the truth about yourself, I'm going to do a family tree. If you tell me the truth, I will figure out who you are, and I will tell you who you are, because that's my job. That's what you're paying me for. But I tell couples that it's not marriage counseling. What this is doing your own individual work, finding out the truth of who you are and where you came from, and shifting out of victim mentality and into gratitude. because we always marry exactly the right person. And their job is we're supposed to become enmeshed for the first 7 years, and then you're up to your eyeballs in diapers. So then 15 years later or so, you're really emotionally distant. I'm trying to get the other hand, and there they are. Anyway, there we go. You got to be smarter than the camera. So you're emotionally distant, and that's when people come into therapy. Usually, of right around early 40s, late 30s is early, uh, early 50s is late. But you're distant, and what we try to do is we figure out how'd you get to be the way you are? What are your issues? How are you wired? Why have you treated your spouse the way you've treated your spouse? What is the truth of you? I guarantee you will find that with your mommy and your daddy and your granny and grandma and your granddad. Trust me, you will. Not even many times the most important thing that ever happened to you happened 2 generations before you were born. Like there's been families where there was great wealth and all of a sudden something happened and all the money was gone. Or in some families there was a particularly horrible suicide that impacted the family, or the dad ran off with the best friend and the mom became depressed. There's stuff that happens. So it's not all about the here and now. So much of who we are and where we came from is about reenacting that in the here and now. So, hey, if you haven't, that's about all I had to share on the topic today. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do that. And also, you can contact me if you'd like to work with me at 317-507-8866. Thank you for watching, and God bless.